Shalom. This is Yair Davidiy speaking to you from Jerusalem, the capital of Israel. Speaking to you from the headquarters of Brit-Am Hebrew Nations, an organization that finds the lost in tribes now amongst Western nations. That is what we do. This is what we are occupied with. We research the whereabouts of the lost in tribes, and we report, publicize our findings, and we work towards reconciliation between the lost in tribes and the Jewish people, between Joseph and Judah. And a whole of what we do is based on the premise that the lost 10 tribes were lost. They lost their identity. They were the majority section of the Israelite nation. There were 12 tribes of Israel. These 12 tribes of Israel divided into two separate kingdoms. The kingdom of Israel was in the north. The kingdom of Judah was in the south. The kingdom of Israel was taken into exile by the Assyrians, and its inhabitants were lost. They lost consciousness, they lost awareness of their ancestry. They became the lost 10 tribes of Israel. Those in the south, the kingdom of Judah remained. They remained together with a minority remnant from the 10 tribes, a very small but representative portion of the 10 tribes did attach itself to Judah, so that amongst the present-day Jews you do have descendants of all of the tribes. Nevertheless, the dominant, the overwhelming majority of the tribes of this kingdom of Judah came from the tribe of Judah, Benjamin, Levi, and small remnants of the others. And this is emphasized by Nachmanides and by other great commentators. And it's also, that is what the Bible tells us. That is what history as well tells us. The 10 tribes of the northern kingdom was completely destroyed. There's no remnant of the northern group of Israel remaining after the Assyrian conquest and destruction. They went into exile and they disappeared. And nevertheless, we trace them to the west, we trace them to Western peoples. We find that they're spoken about in history, they're spoken about in the Bible, the sages, Talmudic sages in the Midrashim and elsewhere. And rabbinical sources all speak about the lost 10 tribes. The lost 10 tribes exist, they are reality, and in the future they will return. So the question comes up, why did they get lost? Why did it have to be that way? Why and how did it happen? What was the reason behind it? Did divine providence have some type of plan, some type of purpose in all this? So that is what we want to discuss very briefly. We should also remember that we can get some idea from different sources, from discussions in the past on the same subject or on related subjects, from biblical verses, and we can bring things together and make suggestions that will hold up, that will be feasible, will tie in with what the sources say. But nevertheless, the bottom line is the facts. The facts, what we know for sure is that there were 10 tribes who disappeared. We also know that the 10 tribes went into exile. We also know that they had a task to fulfill. The Bible speaks of it, and they were destined to receive the fulfillment of promises of blessings through which we may identify them. That is what the Bible says, and that is what we know, and that is enough. That should be sufficient. But we, being human, we want to know why. We want to understand more. So we have a hypothesis. We have suggestions based on sources that can help and give us an answer to these questions. And this is the reality. We may say, according to the Bible, according to the Maimonides and other commentators on the Bible, quoting from different sources, and Rabbi Kook and others, as if we may image it as if once there was a master plan. The Almighty God of Israel had a plan, as if to say, for how things should be. What was the optimum result of the whole scenario that we know concerning the Bible? How the Israelites were in Egypt, they were oppressed, they were taken out of Egypt, they were redeemed, they went into the wilderness and they received the Torah at Mount Sinai. From there they continued onwards to conquer the land of Canaan. In the land of Canaan, which they conquered, they were degraded, they devolved, they became at a lower level than they'd previously been, and they went hankering after the Canaanite culture and gods and what have you, and they degenerated. And this went on and off because there were ups and downs till eventually they were exiled. But what would have been if they had have done as they were supposed to do? What was the initial master plan, as if to say, that God had for these people? So we may say that the 10 tribes were destined or supposed to become a nation of priests and a holy nation. The people of priests and a holy nation. They were supposed to become a model society, to conquer the land of Canaan from the inhabitants, to drive out the inhabitants, to settle in the land of Canaan, to keep the Torah, and to become a model nation that other nations would imitate, that other nations would wish to emulate, and that they themselves, through their economic and their political and their military power, would also be able to exert a controlling influence, one may say, on the rest of humanity, to bring humanity to observe certain basic rules, certain basic standards of humane conduct. The people should act as they should do. The minimum level of humanity should be enforced upon the rest of the world, and the whole of the Israelite nation was supposed to do this and to bring this about. And perhaps in the time of Solomon, when he built the temple, and people came from all over the world to listen to his wisdom, and he advised them and he exerted his influence, maybe then he was getting close to what was supposed to happen, but he too was not able to maintain the pace. It was too much for him and he fell down. At all events, this is what was supposed to be, as far as we can may understand. It's supposed to be some type of messianic era. An early type of messianic era was supposed to be brought into force for all of humanity. But it was too much. The Israelites were not ready. The world was not ready. The Israelites were not able to fulfill it. They were inadequate, and the conditions were not there for them to do so. So, as if to say that Plan B came into effect, a contingency design was already existed for such an eventuality. And so the 10 tribes were separated from Judah. The Israelite nation split into 2 different sections, the kingdom of Israel in the north, the kingdom of Judah in the south. And these 2 different nations existed alongside each other for a few centuries, and then they were conquered. The northern kingdom was conquered and disappeared, whereas Judah continued to exist. It was later taken into exile by the Babylonians, but they returned from their exile, and even in their areas of exile they retained consciousness of their ancestry. They remained who they were. They were identifiable as Israelite tribes, as the Bible had predicted they would be. The 10 tribes are lost. The 10 tribes were lost. They both lost and were lost, and they went away. And people don't know what happened to them until our time, in which we and others have done research on this subject, and we believe we have found them and proven where they are and who they are. So the question, and so why was this? Because this was part of the contingency plan, since they were not able to fulfill the primary purpose in the way they had been intended to do, as if to say they were destined to become like the Gentiles, to go down to the level of the Gentiles, to forget their Israelite ancestry, not to keep the Torah, to become like the Gentiles, to become barbarians like them, to degenerate, as if to say, to their own level of the other peoples, and then to evolve upwards, to come upwards through the course of human history, and to drag the rest of humanity up with them. And this is what they have done. As we shall explain, this is what happened. The Jews, that is the kingdom of Judah, on the other hand, what was it supposed to do? It was supposed to keep the law, to develop the law. There are many prophecies concerning this, saying that this is what Judah would do, Judah was supposed to do. Judah is the lawgiver, the lawmaker. See Psalm 69, 180, 108, 9. Genesis 49:10. There's Zechariah 8:2-3, Hosea 11:12. This was what Judah was supposed to do, and this is what Judah did do. Judah was sent into exile. Judah was uprooted from the land and oppressed and pushed around from place to place. But they did keep the law, and they developed the law, and they kept the Torah. And this may seem somewhat unfair, because the 10 tribes were to benefit from the blessings and the promises, whereas Judah was not, even though the Judah would seem was doing something much harder to perform. He was taking on himself a greater, more difficult task. And indeed, this is so. So first of all, Judah also benefited from what he was. And in addition to that, as we're told in Isaiah 49 at the end of the chapter and other passages, Judah will be recompensated. He will be compensated for what he suffered, for what he had undergone, and he will be vastly rewarded in the end times. And this is all part of the end plan. And we also know that the 10 tribes in their places of exile, even though they had no longer become recognizable as Israelites, they were to receive a portion of the blessings through which we may identify them. Aspects of the blessings were to be filled through them. And one of the reasons was that the fulfillment of the blessings were prerequisites or enabling factors for them to fulfill their task. It says concerning Abraham, Genesis 18:18, Abraham will certainly become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed through him. So this may be read, or is readable, as saying that Abraham will become a great and mighty nation in order that the nations of the earth should be blessed through him. In order to bring about the blessings for the rest of humanity that the 10 tribes had to do, they had to be enabled to do this. They had to become great and mighty and wealthy and powerful, as it was promised to their forefathers of the Israelite nation, and this is what happened. This is indeed how these blessings and promises were fulfilled. So, they may also be asked, why was it done in this way? Why was it done through a punishment? Someone sent us a letter, sent us an email asking, we see in 2 Kings chapter 17 and 18, how the lost 10 tribes were exiled, they were taken away by the Assyrians, and this was done to them because they had gone in the way of the nations around them, and they had copied, taken the example of the peoples around them, and they had lived like them and worshipped idols and acted and conducted themselves for them as they did, and they were consequently punished. It was a punishment. So how can you say that this is something that God Almighty wanted? So we do not know everything. We do not know. We cannot give you a full answer, but we can give you a parallel from other biblical passages, other biblical events. For instance, we see that the Israelites had been told to Abraham, the forefather of the Israelite nation, that the Israelites would be in Egypt, or they would be in a foreign land, and they would be oppressed, and they would come out of it, they would be redeemed. And it says in Genesis 15:13, the Lord said to Abraham, "Now this was certain, that your offspring shall be aliens in the land that is not theirs, and shall be slaves there, and they shall be oppressed for 400 years. And this is what happened. And this is something that had to happen. The divine providence wanted it to happen, wanted the Israelites to go through this process, go through this experience, for reasons that God wanted to come about. And what did happen was that Jacob, they had Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons. Jacob is also known as Israel. The 12 sons of Israel are descended from Jacob. These 12 sons were a group in Canaan. One of them, Joseph, was a favorite son. He was favored by his fathers. The other brothers were jealous, and they threw him in a pit, and then they sold him to Arab traders, slave merchants, who went down to Egypt and sold him there as a slave. Whereas the brothers told their father that a wild beast had killed him, apparently devoured him, and the father seemed to believe this story. Meanwhile, Joseph had been sold as a slave in Egypt. In Egypt, he became, through the passage through a combination of events to become the effectual ruler of the land. Meanwhile in Canaan and in Egypt there was a famine, there was no food. The brothers went down to Egypt to buy food. There Joseph recognized them and became reconciled to them, and Joseph sent message to his father that he was still alive, and he arranged for his father and all their clan, which was more than 70 souls, 70 people, to come down and settle in the region of Egypt that would be set aside for them, and they did. And so they came down and they settled there, and they increased and multiplied, and then there was a new Egyptian king who began to oppress them, and eventually they were redeemed from Egypt through God acting on via the agency of Moses. Moses took them out of Egypt, and they went in the wilderness, received the Torah, and then they entered the land of Canaan. So the sages said that Jacob, we see how Jacob was brought down to Canaan with all his family in a peaceful, respectable manner. So the sages said that actually Jacob had been liable to be taken down as a slave, but because he was a meritorious person, because he had done good in his life, God had mercy on him, and he brought him down that way. He brought him down that way out of respect, out of consideration for the good deeds that he had done. So too, we have a parallel to this. The 10 tribes were destined, needed to become like the Gentiles. And it could have been done in different ways, different pathways to reach the same result were possibly available, but because they sinned, because they deserved punishment, the punishment became the means through which divine providence would fulfill its plan. And so we can understand this. And so this is answer to the question as to why, if the divine providence, or how divine providence used a punishment in order to bring about the fulfillment of a plan which actually had nothing to do with the sins. It was actually something good for the ultimate good of the people. And this is how divine providence often works. And so therefore we see that God had a reason. He had a reason for doing what he did, and there was a reason for doing what had been done. And this is what had happened.